I know, no, it's true. Um, huh. Well, there must be some system for it, right? Otherwise, nobody would do it. I guess not. But you could probably bring one of those little, small ones. Yeah, but even then, I mean, how do you? But there has to be, right? There has to be a whole process. Otherwise, they never would have done it. But right. No, no, I'm going to ask them because if nothing else, I'm just curious. I'm really just curious. Like, how does that work? You'd hope that at least at this point, right, if you put an LED in there, it's going to be good for a while. But, you know, but even then, right, stuff happens. No, I was just going to say, right, it's got to be pretty old. Oh, is that true? Because there are a couple doors there that I've never been through because I don't know what they're for. Yeah, no, that's it probably. Is there? I bet you there's a spot. There must be something above, and they probably change it from above. Yeah, they go all the way up. Boy, that's amazing when you really think about it. Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that not my kind of ride. Oh, everything. There isn't a sing. Everything. Yeah, all that. Oh, you remember the memorial boards that used to get hot? So those are now in a different place altogether. There's a window there now, where those used to be. Not the newer ones, but the really old ones that were right next to where I would be standing, the white ones, the ones that we always had that trouble with, and they felt like they were burning. Yeah, so they no, but there's basically they took everything out, even in the sanctuary. They took everything out, reran all the wiring, insulated it again, painted it, put everything back. I mean, basically anything that is old, they've redone it to a new degree. Yeah, no, they're doing it right. They're doing it right, but that's why it takes so long. It's like every one of these things. But really, it's crazy. I was just gonna say, but it's even more so when you get inside. I haven't been there in about a month and a half, but every time I go, it's just you start to see it more and more. Because bones, you have to use your imagination. But once all of a sudden there are actual walls, and you can't see through everything. Sure, sure. Yes. Yep. Yeah, yeah. It's all, and they're like redo not re, yeah, I know, but no, but right the first time I walked in there and it was like that, I didn't know what was going on. Yeah. Oh no, it is funny. It really is. But it's gonna be great. It's gonna be really great. It's almost. I don't know about any that you can tell me, but no, no, but you'll. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, you love it. Everybody does. That's the point. But just tell me if anything happens, because otherwise I won't know. They let labs. No, 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 no. That's the thing. That's what I'm saying. Is a lot of times I don't. Yeah, I well deserved. Well deserved. You know, that's the thing to think about. That's what I'm saying. It's you guys, not nothing else. Thanks, Bob. All right, Shabbat Shalom. You guys get extra bonus points tonight. Really, come
Yeah,
on.
really.
Trust me, there was a thought. You know, Lou asked me this morning. She's like, "What are you thinking? Right? Who is gonna come out in this Arctic blast?" And but that was exactly my thing. I was like, you know what? This is exactly the time where we'll send out some notice, and somebody will show up, and I'll feel terrible. But and we schlepped Kevin all the way out from the city, so let's have a good time while we're here. But boy, okay in here though feels reasonably. Yeah, it's amazing that not freezing. Yeah, no, it
True.
gives you a real perspective. A real perspective, that is for sure. No, you can't even fathom it, right? I mean, it's in all seriousness, right? If ever there was a moment that gives a person gratitude for the simplest of things like shelter, it is a night like this, right? It is a night like this, and in our case, right, it's going to snap out in a day, Oh yeah, that's right, that's right, that's right. They do also for animals. That's really nice. So it's just to keep the warmth in. Oh, oh my goodness.
Wow.
You're kidding me. That's unimaginable. Oh, cool. Whew, boy. All right. I have to process that for a minute. That's really. No. Yeah, no. You can't. Just trying to even have a mental image for that is beyond belief. All right. Well, again, Shabbat Shalom to everybody here. Shabbat Shalom to all of our friends watching at home. And this is a wonderful Shabbat in that it is a not unusual mixture of a number of things taking place in a short period of time. One of which is what we call Shabbat Shirah. So this week we read from Parshat Beshalach, which has the story of us coming through the Red Sea and singing on the other side, which gives it its name, right? The first thing our ancestors' instinct to do was to sing. And it is also in very advance of, I think Sunday is Tu B'Shvat. So this, you really have to realize that a lot of the, let's call them quote unquote minor Jewish holidays, especially ones that are tied very much to the land of Israel, feel absurd in a moment like this, right? Because Tu B'Shvat is the celebration of the New Year of the trees. So in Israel, your image is like the very, very, very beginnings of like pre-spring stuff. You're starting to see things kind of blooming. You have that image in your mind. Go outside right now, and anybody tell me that that's what you're thinking of. I mean, it feels incongruous, but if you really think about it, actually, so much of Judaism lived, especially in the diaspora, for as long as we have, was exactly this, right? Is like praying for this place called Jerusalem that none of them had ever seen, right? Praying for this land of Israel that none of them would ever probably see in their lifetime. And these holidays about this land that they can't even fathom while they're freezing their tuchuses off in a shtetl somewhere in Eastern Europe. And yet, right, you don't leave these things. You keep them very much in your mind. So it connects us all, but it requires, I think, in all truth, requires us in the diasporic world to go a step further and to really try to work a little bit more to find that kind of hidden meaning. So we'll see how all these things kind of factor into our service. But the Shirah part, the singing part, we're very grateful that we've got Cantor Kevin with us. And last week was really phenomenal. It was great to get some Debbie melodies in here, and we'll try
that
to
was fun.
add in some things as we go. So I think we had talked about starting with a little bit of a taste of what we get on Shabbat Shirah. Tomorrow morning is traditional to read the Shirat Hayam, the song of the sea that was sung as the Israelites come through the Red Sea onto the other side. And it has a somewhat particular melody, but one of its very powerful phrases, Oziv Zimrat Yah, Vayhi Li Yeshua, is a part of and has a very beautiful melody in its own right. So I'm going to just stop talking and I'll turn it over to our leading singer. But let's see if I'll find a page number for us, Kevin, while you get ready. So 647 would be OZ. 647.
Just trying to see if I can find the verse as well, but if not. It's fine. Okay, so We'll just do a little bit of O Ziva Zimratia Vayhili Lishua. O Ziva Zimratia Vayhili Lishua. O Ziva Zimratia Vayhili Lishua. O Ziva Zimratia Vayehili 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 Lishua. O Ziva Zimratia
We'll turn now to page 120 as we light and bless our Shabbat candles. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. We'll turn now to page 130 to begin Kabbalat Shabbat together. Again, page 130.
Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena l'Adonai. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena l'Adonai. Naria, naria, letzur yishenu, nekad mafana b'todah. Naria, naria, letzur yishenu, bizmirot naria lo. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena l'Adonai. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena l'Adonai.
We'll turn now to page 131.
Yismechu Hashamayim, Yismechu Hashamayim, Yismechu Hashamayim, V'tagel haaretz. Yismechu Hashamayim, Yismechu Hashamayim, Yismechu Hashamayim, V'tagel haaretz. Hiram hayam, hiram hayam, hiram hayam, Elom. Hiram hayam, hiram hayam, hiram hayam, Elom.
We'll turn now to page 132.
Heaters are making loud noises.
Yes. They're singing along.
Exactly. עוז הרוח לצדיק ולישרי לב שמחה. עוז הרוח לצדיק ולישרי לב שמחה. עוז הרוח לצדיק ולישרי לב שמחה. ולישרי לב שמחה. עוז הרוח לצדיק ולישרי לב שמחה. וישרי לב שמחה. יאללה לילה יאללה לילה יאללה 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 יאללה
We'll turn now to page 134, very top of the page.
זמרו לאדוני בכינור, בכינור בקול זמרה, בחצוצרות וקול שופר. הריעו לפני המלך אדוני, ירם הים ומלואו, תבל ויושביו, בהרות ימחה וכף יחד הרים ירננו. לפני אדוני קיווה לשפוט הארץ, לשפוט תבל בצדק ועמים במישרים. ירם הים ומלואו, תבל ויושביו, בהרות ימחה וכף יחד הרים ירננו.
We'll turn now to page 135, Romamu, which is the last Hebrew paragraph in the middle of the page.
רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו בהר קודשו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו בהר קודשו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו וישתחוו בהר קודשו.
We'll turn now to Lechadodi on page 138, and a reminder, we'll do the first, second, fifth, and ninth paragraphs, and for the final paragraph, we will rise and face towards the rear of the room.
Let's go. Found my pick. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד, השמיענו אל המיוחד, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ולתפארת ולתהילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי מקור הברכה, מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי, התעוררי, כי באורך קומי אורי, 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 שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. בואי לשלום העטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי כלה, בואי כלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה.
Please be seated. We'll turn now to page 140.
מזמור שיר ליום השבת, מזמור שיר ליום השבת. טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר לשמך עליון, להגיד בבוקר חסדך ואמונתך בלילות, עלי עשור ועלי נבל, עלי היגיון וכינור, להגיד בבוקר חסדך ואמונתך בלילות, עלי עשור ועלי נבל, עלי היגיון וכינור.
We'll rise and body your spirit for the Chatzi Kaddish on page 144. Yitkadal ve'yitkadash shemei Rabba.
Amen.
Ve'al mahadivra chirutei ve'amlich malchutei b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael ba'gala ba'gala u'vizman kariv ve'imeru. Amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevarach Le'alam le'almei almaya yitbarach יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תמירן בעלמא ואמרו Amen. Remain standing for the Baruch Hu on page 146. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach leolam va'ed. Please be seated. We'll turn now to page 148, and we'll read together in English at the bottom of the page. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tzvaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on evening.
Umavir yom umevi laila, umavdil ben yom uven laila, Adonai tzivaot shemo, El chai v'kayam, tamid yimloch aleinu leolam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai,
Baruch Shemo.
Hamari v'ravim.
Amen. We'll turn now to page 151. We'll read together in English at the very top of the page. As you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me. Did you mean the struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery.
כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, והם נגי יומם ולילה, ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים, ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל.
Amen.
שמע ישראל, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Please join us on page 154. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavcha v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol meodecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele Asher Anochi mitzavcha Ayom al levavecha Veshinantam levanecha V'dibarta bam V'shivtecha b'veitecha Uv'lechtecha b'derech U'shofbecha uv'kumecha U'kshartam leot ayadecha V'hayu letotafot b'einecha וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם Adonai Elohechem Emet. Let's read together now on the top of page 157. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. As we turn to page 158.
La 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 האלים אדוני מי כמוך נהדר בקודש נורא תהילות תוסיף אלה נורא תהילות תוסיף אלה מלכותך ולבניך חוקי הים לפני משה ומרים זה אלינו ואמרו זה אלינו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר כי בדע אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני
Baruch Baruch Shemo.
גאל 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 ישראל
Amen. We'll turn now to page 160, Hashkivenu at the very top of the page.
1 second. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom V'hamidenu Shomreinu Lechaim Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom V'hamidenu Shomreinu Lechaim Ushmor tzeitenu uvoenu v'chaim u'shalom me'ata ve'ad olam Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom V'hamidenu Shomreinu Lechaim
Blessed are you, Adonai, guardian of Israel, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over all your people Israel, and over Yerushalayim. As we turn to page 162. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat לדורותם ברית עולם עיני בהני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ וביום השביעי שבת שבת באי נפש. I'll invite us now to rise in body or spirit as we begin the Amidah together on page 164. As always, continue silently from there. Please go at your own pace, and when you're finished, if at the end you're still standing, you may be seated. Adonai sefatai yiftach ufi tehillatcha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise.
יהיו לרצון אמרי פי, יהיון ליבי. יהיו לרצון אמרי פי והגיון ליבי לפניך. אדוני צורי, אדוני צורי וגואלי, אדוני צורי, אדוני צורי וגואלי. יהיו לרצון אמרי פי והגיון ליבי. יהיו לרצון אמרי פי והגיון ליבי לפניך. אדוני צורי, אדוני צורי וגואלי, אדוני צורי, אדוני צורי וגואלי. יהיו לרצון אמרי פי והגיון ליבי. יהיו לרצון אמרי פי והגיון ליבי לפניך.
We'll turn now to page 371 to offer our Mishaberach, our healing prayer for this evening. Tonight in our community, we're thinking of Benzi Tepper, Allison Luckman, Malka Bat Chaya Sura, Michael Klinghofer, Aimee Cass, Warren Cass, Rivka Bat Rachel, Leah Bat Naomi, Gedalia Ben Sylvia, Lorraine Danis, David Dowling, Sivia Devora Bat Francis, Muriel Hirsch, Michelle Sawicki, Francis Kirschman, Shelley Newmark, Diane Axelrod, Gabriella Rose Spicer, Barbara Kushner, David Kyle Klotman, Lorraine Davis, Michael Ben Hanania, Devora Batsima, Becky Snyder, Rebecca Jeffrey Miller, Shelley Lyman, Deborah Block-Kroll, Sylvia Orn, Stanley Rappaport, Karen Layton, Debbie Bookvar, Carol Javna, Lori Nisanoff, Roberta Kyle, Miriam Batchaya, Dina Batchana, Rebecca Rubin, Miriam Levy, Deborah and John Fogarty, and Nessa Rachel Batchana Chaya Sura V'Hatinoket Shala. And for those that are in the room with us tonight, those that would like to share additional names, we'll start on this side and work towards the back. And we'll join together with the cantor in the middle of page 371 as we offer our Mishaberach tonight.
Of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishaberach bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
All right, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Cantor, take a little break. But certainly a lot of Shirah, a lot of beautiful song, and really just exactly the right mood for tonight, I think. And, of course, everyone watching at home couldn't really experience this, but during the Amidah, when the room got very silent, was precisely also when a gigantic gust of wind hit. And even the building sings in moments like that. Maybe not the happiest of songs, but felt like it was singing along in any case. So I want to talk to you a little bit about Shabbat Shirah, and I'm going to get to an ultimate point, I promise you, but I'm going to start from explaining a custom that I don't think many of us are familiar with, but it is actually fairly common custom, especially in more traditional circles, which is to feed birds on Shabbat Shirah. So first of all, we'll just test the cantor. See, familiar with this? Not familiar with this? Ever heard this before? No. Well, we're not. I'm not a bird person necessarily. Didn't grow up with birds so much, other than pigeons, and they have plenty to eat, from what I can tell. But there's actually a challenge with this idea of feeding pigeons, or feeding birds, I should say, on Shabbat. Can anybody guess what that challenge would be? Focus on the Shabbat idea of it. Yeah. So as Kevin is sort of hinting, right? Feeding animals is actually something of a tricky business about Shabbat. Carrying things in particular outside to feed to animals that live outside is challenging, because on Shabbat you're really not supposed to carry things. There is this whole thing we won't get into tonight about an eruv, a special thing that's put up that allows for a certain amount of carrying to be done, but generally speaking, it's not something that you would normally do. I will point out, however, if you have animals in your care that cannot feed themselves without your aid, you are allowed to do that on Shabbat. It's one of the things that is allowed, because the requirements to care for the animals that are in your care, but they have to be specifically animals that otherwise wouldn't be able to eat on their own, right? So I'm looking at Bob and Josie, right? You got to feed the dogs, I got to feed the dog, all those things. But the birds, generally speaking, are perfectly self-sustainable, right? They know how to find their own food. They're not relying on us to feed them. So this ends up actually into one of the great machlokets, the great debates of rabbinic history, especially I think in the 1800s, in which rabbis, believe it or not, get very animated about whether or not it is permissible to feed birds on Shabbat Shirah or not to feed them on Shabbat Shirah. So I'll just tell you, this is not actually the focus of my teaching this evening, but as a great example of coming together and figuring out a solution, I want to make sure I give it to the proper attribution who came up with it. In a second. Yes. So there is a Rabbi Neuwirth who came up with a solution. He says, if you're concerned about the, feeding birds, carrying something, as long as there's an eruv, take your Shabbos table when you're done eating and do this with it. And so all the crumbs that will naturally come off of it will be feeding to the birds, but you won't be doing it directly. So just an example, again, of sort of rabbinic thinking and how you find compromise. But I really actually want to focus more on this idea of Shabbat Shirah and why the birds, right, of all the reasons. There's a few different explanations over time. As a professor of mine once explained, whenever you have multiple explanations of something in Judaism, it probably means that none of them are actually correct. And there just is somewhere along the way someone decided this was a thing to do. But the main idea of it is that by feeding the birds, I'll read actually the most common. So Rabbi Yechiel Mechiel Epstein, who was 1829-1908, was a very significant halachic rabbi, writes that there is a popular saying amongst the masses that the birds sang at the sea, right, the song of the sea that we read tomorrow, they sang at the sea, and therefore we are grateful to them. Thus, the purpose of feeding them is to remember the joy of Shirat Hayam, the song of the sea, and therefore we have no halachic objection to feeding the birds. In other words, we feed the birds in order to thank them for their historical engagement at the Song of the Sea. And there's another version of this idea which is even broader. Rabbi Eliyahu Kitov says that the reason that we actually do this is that birds receive their reward on Shabbat Shirah for the songs which they utter to God every single day. And when we recite our song, we remember their song. So in other words, it's not just about Shabbat Shirah, it's that birds, the way that they sing is their prayer to God, and they do it every day the same way that we do, but they receive their reward, so to speak, only on this Shabbat of all Shabbats. And I should point out that all of this is coming really largely from a Kabbalistic work that is known as, I think it's Masechet Shirah. It's literally a whole treatise on all of the acts of creation and how they pray to God, and how they ultimately do it through song. And that's really the emphasis of my sermon tonight, is really focusing on this idea of song and how essentially important it is to us, especially as Jews, not just because it is pleasing or pleasant, but because it actually represents one of the purest forms in which creation prays to God, right? Offers our gratitude to God, and gratitude really is at the very core of it. So I want to share with you what is, I believe, a Hasidic teaching of which I could not find its original origin. The translation that I'm using is from a book that was written by M.S. Kleinman, Or Yesharim, and in the end it's part of another anthology by Louis Newman called the Hasidic Anthology. But it tells a sort of interesting, what we would call a kind of parable story, a mashal, of which I'm not 100% sure I'm convinced, but I found it interesting enough that I wanted to teach it and see if I could convince myself as we go. So it says as follows. Once there was a man who was kvetching before Rav Moshe of Lakovich. Kvetching, for those that don't know our terminology, complaining about their lot, as it were. Complaining about the brevity of his prayer, right? He doesn't pray long enough, the poor quality of his acts, the things that he does, and ultimately how sad this made him as a person. He felt like he wasn't living up to his charge. However, the very act of talking about his problems brought him comfort. His pain, his sorrow, his suffering faded, and his ability to feel joy was strengthened, for he realized that others in the end were actually worse off than he. So this is just to say, first of all, early pitch for the power of therapy. Just being able to speak sometimes really is a relieving, cathartic element for all of us, and we should all take advantage of it when we should need it or on a regular basis, but that for aside. Okay, but here is sort of one of the less powerful arguments I've ever heard of why to feel good in your life is because you realize that somebody has it worse. It's the old teaching of, tell your kids if you don't like lima beans, right? There's a starving child somewhere in the world who would eat those lima beans. Tell me if that has ever been an effective form of pedagogy or teaching. Not generally, right? The kid's still not going to learn it. It's not usually the thing that we do. But in this story, let's take it for what it is. And it says that this guy, just from talking, right? The rabbi hasn't even opened his mouth to comfort him. Just talking through and realizing, you know what? I have all these problems. These things aren't great, but my life is pretty good. And I realize actually now that I think about it, I'm thinking of my other friends who I know are in worse positions. And so they get better. So now it gets interesting. The Holy Spirit says to the Rebbe, can one truly derive joy from realizing that other people are worse off? How can one even know who is worse off or better? How can one make that judgment that someone else is worse off and from there come to joy? Okay, so the question they're ultimately asking is what I think most of us should ask. First of all, how do we know anybody's life is better or worse than ours? All of our assumptions about other people's lives are usually very far off from the realities that we may assume. But they're asking sort of a principal question about this. Where does this joy actually come from? Is this a legitimate way to find joy in realizing that you're slightly better off than somebody else who has it worse? Okay, so they're asking sort of fundamental question. I'm not sure, by the way, I'll just tell you at the outset that question really gets answered, but it leads to a very interesting mashal, a parable, which I'm going to share with you now. So this is a classic a rhetorical device of the rabbis when trying to explain a complex idea to tell a narrative, to tell a parable story, usually about a king or a queen or somebody of the sort, in this case, a king. So this can be compared to a situation of a king who has an orchestra with musicians for each and every kind of instrument available to play for him at any time. Also in his palace there was kept a small bird, a nightingale that trilled and chirped in its cage. The king derived great pleasure from its song, though the bird had no awareness of this at all. It did not know the laws of music theory to sing, definitely did not know more than the masters of music, who are experts in their instruments. What the king's pleasure was to hear its voice, because it is a creature without any real consciousness or its own independent intelligence, through which it made heard its lovely voice. In other words, the king has the option to listen to the Philharmonic at any point, right? Decides, I want to hear a requiem. It's there in an instant. And yet, what is the thing that actually brings the king the greatest joy? The bird the nightingale that's sitting in his room. Why? Because there is a pureness to the nightingale's voice. There is no theory, there is no competition amongst the musicians, there is no Rachmaninoff or Mozart or who is the best, there's none of it. It's simply the way in which the bird sings its existence. Its simple presence, its simple voice. And the king, in the end, prefers that to this otherwise objectively better source of music and enjoyment in the form of the orchestra itself. And so, they say, is the same case with a person. Does not the Holy Blessed One, in other words, God, have bands and bands replete with multitudes of angelic charioteers who exalt and glorify God with speech, crystal clear and lovely tone, with celebration and song, with melodious exaltation? And still, the Holy Blessed One receives such pleasure from the human being in our song, as imperfect as we are, as struggling as we are, seemingly so much worse than the hosts of the perfect angels above. So in other words, the parable of the king and the orchestra and the bird is compared to the experience of God and to our form of prayer, as opposed to the form of prayer that is received presumably by God by the angels, or presumed by God, given by the angels in the angelic courts all around them. That the question is, okay, so why, in the end, does God care about anything that we say, or any of the birds singing, or any of this stuff, when God has the greatest perfect source of music in the existence in the form of the angelic choir? And the reason why is the same reason why the king loves to hear the sound of the bird. Because in the end, even though it is not, let's say, perfect, it is not as orchestrated as the collection of musicians, it is not as practiced and rehearsed, it's not ideal, it is genuine. It is authentic, it is deep, it is real. It comes from the very essence of the animal or the creature, and it is the way in which we connect in the highest form ultimately to God. So I don't think, as I said, it answers the question about how it is that people really can derive joy from realizing that they're slightly better off than anybody else. That to me was less germane. But the emphasis on just how important song is, and just how important our singing is, and just how important really all of creation's voicing of our prayers to God are, that is really the essence of this, and why Shabbat Shirah is so important, and why it is ultimately not just on Shabbat Shirah, but throughout our Jewish existence, that song has been our preferred method for prayer. We can do lots of things silently, we can do lots of things in a mumble, we can do lots of things just reading off the page, but in the end, throughout time, throughout history, throughout our experience in the diaspora, to this day in the land of Israel, the clearest form of our spiritual expression is in song, unquestionably so. And I love this sort of image of the idea that while our singing, right, Kevin's singing is perfect, right? But right, my singing may occasionally crack, the notes are slightly off, I might do something wrong here or there. Even Kevin, who's a humble guy, would probably say it happens every once in a while, even to the greatest cantors. A lot, okay? There is a part of our brain that may stand up and say this is terrible, right? We've missed something is off. But I think actually that's missing the point. And I think that if our version of prayer in song was that it needed to be as perfect as the angels on the heights above, all you would ever hear is the cantors singing in their space. Right? But Cantor Kevin, that's not his approach. It's never been the approach of any cantor that's ever served in this congregation, student or otherwise. And I don't think that it is the experience of most leaders, shlichei tzibur, throughout our history, the desire to hear their own voice. What they're really trying to do is to instill in a whole community the capacity to sing and to be able to express themselves in that way. And I've often pointed out, and this is really actually from a comment that a choir leader once explained when I said that I could hear his voice, and in the choir, and he said that if that's the case, then I've done something wrong. And I thought about it, I was like, I didn't even realize, I thought I was paying the guy a compliment, and I realized it was actually, probably unintentionally insulting, but what was he really trying to teach me? The purpose of the choir singing together is to bring that voice together, to unite it in some form, so that even if there is one really strong person and one person whose voice is a little bit weaker, a little bit off, that collectively it will usually pull the volume, pull the melody, pull everything together, where all you really hear is the best amalgamation of all of those voices. And I think that there is a really deep spiritual teaching in this Shabbat, to remind us that as our ancestors, their first instinct was to sing as the moment they experienced freedom. Song really can bring you from the depths to the heights. It can bring you through the worst moments that you can find yourself in. It can unite a people behind a cause. And ultimately, it can even shatter walls, right? Sound has that capacity to even break down barriers. And I think that while we tend to focus only sort of narrowly on this one song, right, the Shirat Hayam, Shabbat Shirah over time has really become something much larger. And it's really to point out to us as Jews to appreciate how unique this really is, and how special it really is, and how reflective actually it is of a greater spiritual truth, was that our singing is not just about making our ears happier or make the service go by in a more pleasant way. This is our best form of prayer in so many ways. It is the way in which we really convey to God what it is that we feel. And if we go back to the focus, I guess, of this story, if there's one thing to take away from it, is that gratitude is at the very center of it all. And nothing sounds more beautiful, in my experience, than a room full of people experiencing gratitude, singing praises. It doesn't happen as often today as it did, but when you study our history and you study through the Torah, through the Tanakh, through the rabbis, through the darkest ages of our people, through the camps, through everything, and especially to the earliest days of the state of Israel and the fights that were going on, right? You will never find a night that went by without singing. You would never find a day that went by without, some element of this prayerful song coming into our voices and into our hearts. And I think all the more reason that on this Shabbat, as we should in every Shabbat, but this Shabbat especially, to really be grateful for how much love, how much appreciation, how much gratitude comes from these unbelievable melodies and these unbelievable voices that have guided our people through time. So all the more reason I'm very grateful for our amazing voice, Cantor Kevin, and I'll take this opportunity to wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom and to welcome you back up to the Bima, and we'll close our evening together with some more singing, Aleinu L'Shabeach, which is on page 586 at the very bottom of the page, 586. Aleinu L'Shabeach Ladon HaKol, Latet Gedula Leotzer Breshit, Shelo Asanu Kegoye Ha'aratzot, Velo Samanu Kemishpechot Ha'adama, Shelo Sama Chelkenu Kahem, Vegor Aleinu Kechol Hamonam, Vanahafnu Korim, Umishtachavim Umodim, Lifnei Melech Malchei HaMachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. Ask those in mourning, those observing yahrzeit to please remain standing. Everyone else may be seated at this time. We think first of those who have passed in our community in recent months. Martin Blake, Arlene Eber, Chaim Bear Greenwald, Sandy Greenwald, Jane Beard Cass, Gertrude Katz, Buddy Kossoff, Elaine Krotman, Emmanuel Kiprios, David Lieberman, Sandra Luongo, Norma Pulsek, Marvin Schreier, Anita Sheldon, Alan Silver, Sandy Slip, Larry Wartor, Rita Weitzman, Yael Zerdar, and Pedro Moreno. We also mark the yahrzeits that occurred during the last week for Larry Abelman, Alvin Abrams, Sylvia Alderman, Sophia Ballin, Shifra Bat Rab Aryeh, Harry Birkin, Julian Coleman, Louis Field, Esther Gilbert, Harold Harlan, Jeff Harris, Dorothy Marks, Samuel Marks, Jay Morris, Yetta Goldberg Moskowitz, Randolph Oliphant, Estelle Posner, Shana Protas, Carol and Richard Shine, Joseph Schultz, Richard Schultz, Rebecca Goldstein Schwartz, Esther Siegelwax, Anna Silberman, Mary Goldstein Simons, Leo Steinberg, Tina Polan, Louis Udell, and Martha Zimmerman. Is anyone else saying Kaddish for anyone that we did not mention tonight? I'll invite the mourners to join with me on page 598. Yitkadal ve'yitkadash shemei rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divrach yirutei ve'amlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shemei rabba mivarach le'alam u'le'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dukudsha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shalama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Amen.
Zichronam livracha. May every one of their memories be for a blessing. Okay, please be seated. And again, a Shabbat Shalom to everyone. A few important notes. First is to join us for Shabbat services tomorrow morning at 9:30. If you'd like to join Kevin and myself here at the Old Whalers Church, they'll come around on the other side of the building and enter as we'll be meeting in the chapel. And also a reminder that tomorrow's Torah study is the first Torah study of the month, and therefore the women's Torah study, which this month will be led by Judy Hollander. So we hope you will join us again tomorrow at 12 o'clock on Zoom. Also a reminder, beginning Sunday night and into Monday, Tu B'Shvat, the New Year of the Trees. We'll be celebrating it certainly with our Hebrew school kids on Monday. And also our Temple Adas Israel youth group is bowling, I'm told, at 5 o'clock on Sunday. So if you're a youth and you like bowling, you can meet up with us at the, what is it called? Clubhouse in East Hampton. Just a reminder, this week, Nina Mitzvah will be meeting at 11:30 on Monday, I believe virtually only at this point in the season. 3:30 Hebrew School, 5 o'clock Social Justice Committee as weekly meeting, and 6 o'clock the post-B'nai Mitzvah class with myself. And then at 7 o'clock, the Musar group with Myra. Again, you can join up really at any time. It's great opportunity to learn with Myra. Also a reminder that there is a documentary film on Theodore Bickel, which is called In the Shoes of Shalom Aleichem. And my understanding is the way that this will work next week is that you can watch the film anytime between the 6th and the 9th, and then on Thursday night at 7 o'clock, we'll have a discussion with the film's director, and that will be on Zoom. Just make sure that you do register and sign up. Beyond that, I think those are all my notes. Cantor, anything on your end?
All good from
All
me.
good from here. Certainly stay warm. In all seriousness, stay warm, especially you guys when you go out, be careful. You never know what can freeze over as you can't see. So just assume everything you're walking on is ice. As a general, it's what I learned in Wisconsin. Assume everything you were walking on is ice at all times, and you will hopefully make it home in one form or the other. It's probably true in Colorado.
Very true in Colorado as well, yeah.
Good. Cantor, I think we'll close with something.
Yeah.
And then we'll do a Kiddush.
Fantastic. I might take just a little bit of an extra minute with y'all to kind of give a little bit of a teach, and hopefully it might be one you already know, but I think it fits exceptionally well, kind of with Rabbi's sermon as well, about really trying to also just create this moment of song, even though we're kind of so few in person as of right now. I think that even those at home, if you sing along as well, we're really going to create a kind of a communal choir as well. And obviously, I would love to hear everyone in person, but we have to deal with the situation at hand. So the words to this can be found on page 635, and there are two parts that are exceptionally easy, which the words are just Shabbat Shalom, and then the other one is Shabbat Shalom Umevorach. And then we'll get into a little bit of Shir Hamalot at the end as well. So, Shabbat Shalom Umevorach. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Umevorach. Shir Hamalot B'shuv Adonai. Et Shivat Zion hayinu kecholmim. Az yemale schok pinu ulshonenu rina. אז יאמרו הגויים, הגדיל אדוני לעשות עמלה, שבת שלום, שבת שלום, שבת שלום, ומבורך. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom.
It's beautiful. We'll turn now to page 123 for Kiddush, and we'll rise, yes, in body or spirit, rise. Page 123. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kinshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho mi'ahava uvratzon inchilanu zikaron lemahaseh v'reishit כי הוא יום תחילה למקראי קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים. כי בנו בחרת, ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, ושבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. Amen. Chaim. And Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Teva.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Get home safe, really. Get home safe. Be careful.